Another thing that I started doing was eating raw meat. So that kind of started about 2022. I was living in France, and
Rachel, how did you find carnivore?
so I found Carnivore in 2020, just after COVID happened. I was living in Wales for a short time, actually, and I like Jordan Peterson, so I found it through Jordan Peterson, and it was actually quite by accident. Somebody mentioned his daughter's crazy diet, and I was like, "Whoa, what is that?" Because I was so into him, So I looked into it, and then I watched her video, her talk, about the carnivore diet, and I was like, "Whoa!" So I was having some of the issues that she was having. Um, so it was kind of like my reason to start carnivore was that I was having severe mental issues, and emotional issues. And it was to do with, I think, diet and life circumstances as well. So I thought if it fixed her problems, and then Jordan Peterson was doing it as well, and if it fixed his problems, I was like, well, I have to try it, because I had tried every diet for like years and years. I was vegetarian for 7 years, from 13 to 20. And I was basically vegan for like half of that time as well. And then I went back to eating like normal food, like a little bit of meat, like um, once or twice a week. But my health was always really, really bad as a kid as well. And when I was vegetarian, I just started to fall apart. So the doctor did actually tell me to eat some meat, and I was less sick then. So I went from vegetarian to normal to carnivore then in 2020. So I had right before carnivore, I had started like an organic diet. So I was being really, really careful with my food, and everything was organic, but I was having some physical health issues as well. Like I had acne, I had chronic heartburn like all my life. And it just would never go away. Like that's why I was changing my diet all the time to try and get rid of the heartburn. Um, and then before COVID, before 2020, I was getting acne, I was getting psoriasis on my skin. Um, like, yeah, I was just in a terrible way. My joints were bad as well, my wrists. I had a ganglion in my left wrist. And so when I went carnivore, I just did meat, salt, and water, because I hadn't heard of anything else otherwise, and I didn't research it. I just went beef, salt, and water. Um, so yeah, it was a really hard like transition. The sugar withdrawal, I think it was the carb withdrawal. It was really, really hard. Like I was in bed for like 3 days. I couldn't get out of bed. I was just so tired. Um, and then after like 5 days, I started to feel really, really good. And then I had all the after effects of starting carnivore as well, which I won't go into. And I didn't expect those. But yeah, I started to feel like really, really good, really, really quickly. Um, and then for about 6 months, I felt the best that I've ever felt in my life. Um, I was about 10 kilos heavier than I am now, I suppose. Maybe like 70, 76, 77 kilos. And I lost, in the 6 months, I lost 20 kilos nearly. So I was actually underweight, but I felt really, really good. But I didn't realize I was starving because I had no fat. So I was just eating protein for most of that time. And then I had some eggs here and there and some tuna, but I didn't realize, yeah, that I was starving. Um, so I actually ended up getting really, really sick again after the 6 months. Yeah, like, so what happened was the depression pretty much went away. Like I was a lot better. And then, yeah, after the 6 months, it started to come back, and the psoriasis started to come back on my skin as well. And like my brain just wasn't functioning, because I think I'd eaten all my body fat. So my therapist, I had a therapist at the time, and she told me that the carnivore diet was too extreme and to go off of it. And she thought that was the reason that I was in such a bad way. So I went off the diet for 6 weeks. And I put on like 20 kilos within that time, like real quick, even more, I think. Yeah, and I didn't add in that much food. Like I was eating pancakes, bread, some bananas. Like I was keeping it really, really simple. And it was like I got a lot worse with the other food. Acne came back really, really bad. My brain just wasn't functioning well at all. Like pain in my stomach, pain in my wrists, heartburn, constant heartburn. So everything just came back then, and it was kind of like winter time as well, so it was dark. Um, and then eventually, like after testing what she had said, I was like, no, like I'll go back to carnivore. So after 6 weeks, I went back to carnivore, and then I started to feel better again. See, I've done a lot of testing within the last 4 years. Probably too much testing, but I'm glad that I did test because now I know what works for me and what doesn't work. So I watched Paul Saladino as well. I started researching and I realized that I needed fat. So I was like, okay, this time I'm going to have fat in my diet. And then I came across Paul Saladino. I was trying fasting as well. So I was doing some extended fasts and I tried honey. So for a lot of the time that I've been on carnivore, I've been having honey, which hasn't been great. And I've tested fruit and I've tested dairy and I've tested raw dairy. Um, so I think the honey was giving me issues definitely. Um, every time I tried like different things, like I tried strawberries one time and I thought it would be fine because it wasn't very many. And I had a little punnet of strawberries and I'd heartburn for 3 days. And then I had melon, and I had melon for a few weeks. And this was like maybe 2 years ago. And I really thought the melon was fine. And then eventually I got acne. So it just seemed that it was fine, but then it wasn't. But a lot of things like happened, like a lot of things went away. Like, I don't know if you've ever had like red pimples on the backs of your arms. Like, I had those my whole life and they went away with carnivore. And every time I would eat things with sugar or anything out of the diet, they would come back. Um, when I felt really good for the first 6 months, I had skin tags on my face and they disappeared. I had moles, and moles, like I saw it come up on my arm and disappear. Like it just crusted over and then disappeared. I was just blown away. It was crazy. And my eyesight was starting to get bad for a few years and it was always like perfect. I had perfect eyesight. And then it started to get bad. And then with strict carnivore, it got better. And it's like it's perfect now. I'm back on strict carnivore now. I did some testing with milk last year. I was having like milk and cream. And for this whole time as well, like I was having coffee and I was smoking cigarettes. So anyway, so the milk, there's so many things I've tried, but the milk, I noticed that when it was pasteurized, I got acne and I was nauseous for like 7 months and I didn't know why. And I kept going to the doctor. And they were trying to give me was like nausea tablets. And then eventually I said it to the pharmacist downstairs. I live above a pharmacy, and she said, "Oh, maybe cut out dairy, because that can make people nauseous." So I cut out the dairy, and it went away. It never came back, the nausea. And then I tested with raw milk, and I wasn't nauseous, but I had some digestive issues. But I really tried for a long time just to make sure. But I'm pretty sure I'm lactose intolerant. So last year that was a lot of like milk testing. So I was just having meat, eggs, and then some milk. And I was having a little bit of honey as well. And I was having coffee. So I quit smoking last June and I was really, really sick for like the whole summer. And then in August, I quit coffee. And I quit smoking and coffee mostly because I was having panic attacks and they were so severe that I was like, I'm going to die of panic attacks because they were making me really, really sick. So this has been happening for a few years. I've been having panic attacks. And then for about 3 weeks, I'd have all the symptoms of lupus and my hair was falling out and like I just couldn't get out of bed. It was really bad. So I quit smoking and then I quit coffee. And when I quit coffee, I'd never been so calm in my life. Like I was really tired. I was drinking a lot of coffee, like, but yeah, like I just had never been so calm. So since then, I haven't had a proper panic attack. like not a full on panic attack since then. I had a little bit of caffeine over Christmas and I did feel a little bit panicky. So then I realized I just can't have any caffeine. Um, and I don't know why, but I'd say if some people are on carnivore, caffeine is a big one. I feel like I should have quit that sooner, but it's the way it is, so I'll never have caffeine again. Anyway, and I do feel a lot better. And then I was still having honey. So last October, I quit honey because I was having some joint issues. So all I was having was beef, lamb, um, and then some eggs, and then I quit honey in October. Um, and pretty much 95% of my joint issues went away. But I think I've got some inflammatory issues, not to do with diet. I don't know. Maybe it's to do with stress. And I just get inflammation every so often, and then it goes down and it goes away. But I don't have any diagnosis for anything. And then I suppose another thing that I started doing was eating raw meat. So that kind of started about 2022. I was living in France, and somebody over there mentioned to me about steak tartare and raw meat, and I was like, "Oh, that's gross! Like, I don't want to eat that." And then I started thinking about it, and I came across some influencers on YouTube with raw, and they were eating raw meat, and I thought they were crazy. Like, I had to dismiss them. I thought they were absolutely insane. I was like, "There's no need for that," like strict carnivore is it's gone far enough without like eating raw meat. But anyway, this person that I knew in France, he had mentioned the tartare and he said it was nice. So I thought that I'd try it anyway. So I tried it and I was really scared and I was just eating like tiny amounts and making sure like the butcher in the shop did it really clean and everything. Um, and I loved it. Like I never felt so good like ever eating anything. Like it was like a sense of like euphoria that I got when I ate it. And I was like, this is like, it's strange, but it's really nice. But I was scared. I was scared that I was gonna die from bacteria poisoning. So I didn't eat it very often. I was really careful. Um, Maybe once a week or once every few weeks for that year. And then when I came back to Ireland, it was last year, and just kind of out of staying with a friend, so just kind of out of convenience. I didn't want to be cooking all the time, so I was just eating the raw meat. Like, but I would eat like ground beef just out of the packet from the supermarket, and I'd started doing that in France as well, and then sometimes like there would be like meat in the fridge and I'm like, oh, it looks so nice just the way it is. So I just start like eating it. So I've been eating raw meat a little bit and then I was like, okay, like I really like raw meat. I'm gonna have to research this because I don't want to die. And I came across this guy, I don't know if you know him. He's the raw meat experiment and he went on YouTube a few years ago now. And the title of his videos were I'm going to eat raw meat every day until I die from bacteria poisoning. And so I watched some of those, and they're pretty funny videos. And he's just eating his raw meat, and people are stopping him. And so I watched loads of his videos, and I was like, oh, I'm going to see like what's the last video that he did, just to see like is he still going. And his last video, like when I checked, it was a few months ago. And then everybody in the comments were like, RIP, man, like, rest in peace. So I thought he had died. And I was like, oh shit. And so I went on to, it turned out in the comments, somebody was like, oh no, he's just moved on to Instagram. So he's on Instagram and he's fine. And now he's eating raw chicken, and he's eating like raw everything, like all meat based. Um, and so I watched a lot of his stuff, and then I found some other influencers who were eating raw meat. It's just there's not very many of them. And then eventually I came across a few books, and I wrote down the name of it in case anybody is interested. Um, the book is called the Contagion Myth, and then there's also the works of Augenis von der Planets. Um, and it took me a long time to find him, but everybody in the raw meat kind of community would be following Augenus Vonderplanets, and he created the original primal diet. I don't know if you've heard of him. So the original primal diet was everything was raw, but Augenus Vonderplanets, he suggests to have other foods as well as raw meat. So he promotes raw meat, raw fat, but also raw honey and vegetable juices and things like that. So I don't follow those things because I've already tested with different vegetables and fruits and things like that. So I have to do strict. But there's not much information on raw meat, so people are only coming out now and starting to talk about that. But at the moment, my diet is like 90% raw meat, some raw eggs. Sometimes I'll have like some cooked bacon, but like now with my steaks, I just don't see why I would cook it. It just like ruins it. I much prefer having it
Really?
raw. Yeah,
Wow.
I never thought that would happen.
So what is a day? What is a day of eating like for you?
It can be different. Like some days I'll have eggs, or I might have eggs for a few days, like some raw eggs. But I've cut out the egg white, and I'm just having the egg yolk, um, because I've heard about some issues with the egg whites. I'm not really sure, but I'm just trying that for the moment. And then I'll eat like some raw ground beef. I get it from a farmer, so mostly from a farmer, so it's not vaccinated. And yeah, and it's fresh and everything. I'll have some raw liver. I'll have some raw steaks. It depends. Sometimes I eat some cooked bacon and some cooked chicken, but I do feel better when I have raw, definitely.
And you're eating like 3 meals a day, or just whenever you're hungry?
So I did a lot of fasting about 2 years ago. I did like I did OMAD, so 1 meal a day. Most of the time it's like 2 meals a day. But I think I did so much fasting that it wasn't good for my body. Like I did a 10-day fast and I was sick after it. So then I just stopped entirely. I was like, it's not good. And I was listening to some people and they said that fasting is bad. So I was kind of forcing myself to eat throughout the day for the last few months. But I didn't feel great doing that. So I do notice that I feel a lot better when I eat once or twice a day. But sometimes I graze as well, so it depends. And then I'm a performer, so when I'm working, I noticed without the coffee, it's really hard to have the energy. So if I don't eat until after the performances, I have more energy to do them. So I kind of tend to eat more on the days that I'm not performing, and then I eat less on the days that I am performing. So I do it like that just for energy reasons.
Wow. Wow. And like, is this dancing or something like that's very, very active, or is it performing like singing or something?
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of everything. It's for children, so I would be dancing around and doing magic, and yeah, it's very full on, a lot of energy, and it would be for the whole day as well, so it can be full on.
Yeah. And the thing where it's trying to keep children engaged is going to take it out of you, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, you've been pretty strict like this since October.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And you don't see it changing going forward?
No, because like what happened last September. So after I quit cigarettes and coffee, and I was really tired. I had a problem with my left hip, and like I literally couldn't walk. I just went for a short walk, and then all of a sudden it was really, really sore. So it's just been sore ever since. And so the only other thing for me to cut out was honey. So I'd been testing my blood sugars, and they were quite high for fasting blood sugars. I mean, they were up in like 120 after fasting for like 20 hours. And my doctor said that that was fine, but I've researched and that's like pre-diabetic. So I think I might have made myself pre-diabetic from having honey. So I decided to cut out honey, and then my pain like quite gradually decreased. So yeah, like it's like 95% better. And then sometimes I think it's when I'm tired or maybe there's stress on my body. that it gets a little bit sore, but it's definitely not as bad. And also my knees were bad and my wrists were bad. They're a lot better. Um, a lot better. And as well, I had a ganglion in my wrist before I started carnivore. So I do have some joint issues that are not diagnosed. But like when I first went carnivore in 2020, like it was a ball of fluid, and the doctors were saying that they were going to surgically remove it. And then I had left the country by then. But like I'd say by about week 3 or week 4 of carnivore, it had disappeared entirely. So for joint issues, like having no sugar is definitely the best thing. I think some people can have sugar, like Paul Saladino, or maybe people who are exercising so much, they're getting rid of all that sugar. But if you're not, like I think some people just can't have any sugar. I don't know if you have that as well, that you can't have any sugar.
I can't have anything that is even remotely addictive.
There's that too. Yeah, I'm like a sugar addict as well. And I only noticed like after 6 weeks on strict carnivore, then my cravings go away.
Mm.
And if I have any
So
sugar, they come back.
yeah, yeah, it would be the same. It's just this kind of downward spiral, right?
Yeah.
Um, so how are your friends and family reacting to this? Like, not only is it just basically a meat diet or a meat and eggs diet, you're also, grazing on raw ground beef. So, like, what do you say? Oh, don't worry, it's a French thing or something, or like, what are they saying?
Yeah, everyone just thinks I'm very strange. And I find it strange because people that I don't know, people that I meet are actually really interested in it. And they don't think it's strange. They're just curious. But yeah, people that I know would be concerned for my health. They probably think I'm going crazy or something. But I mean, it's fine. Like, there's a lot of raw meat that we eat anyway. Like there's oysters. I had sashimi. So that's just like raw fish. A blue steak is kind of close enough. Steak tartare is raw beef. Um, and there are cultures, today. There's certain cultures all over the world. I mean, in it's in Japan, they eat a lot of raw fish. In Africa, they have restaurants and it's all raw beef. So, it is popular in some parts of the world. It's just in our culture, it's strange. And I researched a lot about the bacteria poisoning, and it's just not true. Um, you know, um, and if anyone reads that book, The Contagion Myth, it talks about Louis Pasteur, and on his deathbed, Louis Pasteur said that his theory, that germ theory, is fraudulent. His studies were fraudulent. Um, and I've tested it myself as well. It's impossible to give yourself bacteria poisoning. And on all of the meat packets in Ireland, I don't know if it's the same where you are, but it tells you that you must cook this meat thoroughly. Um, and even in the butchers, when you buy meat, like they have to put up a sign saying, whatever you buy from the shop, you must cook thoroughly. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
it's kind of going against
no, it's
what everybody's what everybody's known
it,
for their whole lives.
yeah. It's very kind of in your face. You must cook this meat. It's like, don't bathe in it, don't throw it at people, just cook it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean,
um,
you can rub raw meat all over your counters, and no, don't wash it, and you won't get bacteria poisoning. Yeah.
wow. But yeah, so you're kind of the outlier though, as far as family and friends go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone thinks I'm
So,
really strange.
well, I'm just interested. Like, what's the what when you go out to dinner with friends? What's that kind of like? I mean, in that case, you just have a cooked steak or something.
Yeah, like I'll eat cooked meat in that situation. I'd preferably have a rare steak. Or it's great if there's somewhere that has oysters. Or now I know I like sashimi. Um, I'll definitely eat before I go out. regardless. But yeah, and just move stuff around on the plate. Yeah,
That's
so there's a
awesome.
few options, but it is limited,
Yeah. So for someone that's watching this, um, we're talking about eating basically just meat and eggs, and also we're taking it one step further. We're talking about eating raw stuff. I mean, for someone that's considering a new way of eating, this might sound strange. How can you get away with just eating meat all the time? What would you say to them?
I would say try it. Um, yeah, try it if you're interested. And then like the feeling that you'll get from eating it, most people who do end up eating raw meat, they get the feeling of euphoria, and then they just love it. And I've noticed as well, like my hair fell out repeatedly when I was having the lupus symptoms, and my hair was always very, very thin. When I was a child, it was really thick, and then it went really, really thin. And like my hair has been growing back thicker than I've ever seen it since last August, and it hasn't fallen out at all. Um, I feel better. I feel like digestion is better as well. And, you know, some really interesting things happen, like body odor completely disappears as well. And you wouldn't think that that's even possible. But yeah, like I definitely recommend, but I don't think it's necessary for a lot of people as well, only if they're really interested. But also it depends. If somebody is really really sick, it's worth a shot, because when you cook the meat, you are killing a lot of the nutrients. Um, like half of the B vitamins are gone. I know that with fat, like I have problems digesting cooked fat sometimes, unless I let it cool down afterwards. But with raw fat, it's fine. And I've heard that vitamin D is stored in raw fat, and vitamin C is in the muscle meat as well. So like those things are killed when you cook it. And I think a lot of the B vitamins stay there. And maybe the A vitamins stay there as well. So like I'm not 100% sure. I tried to research this, but there's no information on Google. But I've been eating mostly raw meat, and I got my vitamin D levels checked, and they were quite high. They weren't overly high, but I'm in Ireland and there's no daylight. Like I've literally had no daylight in months and months and months and months. And my vitamin D levels were high. And I was surprised at that because everyone else's were low at that time. It was in December that I got them checked. And the doctor expected them to be low. And I did too. But they were high. And I think it's the raw fat. So yeah, if people have vitamin D deficiencies, if they're in dark, cold countries and they can't go outside and they're particularly sick, definitely. And then there's also one step further, from raw meat is fermented raw meat. And it's been known to cure people with chronic depression. I haven't tried it yet, but basically, if you're lacking a lot of bacteria in your gut, that could be a reason for depression and not feeling good. And so, with the fermented meat, you replenish the bacteria. But it needs to be from an unvaccinated animal, and it needs to be not frozen before as well. So I did some tests and they went moldy, so I didn't want to try them. So I put them in the bin. And I'm trying new tests now. So you have to leave it for about 2 months in a jar. And then you air it out every day. And it does smell awful. And so it hasn't been vaccinated and it hasn't been frozen. So hopefully it will be okay, and I'll try it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, it's very out
Um,
there.
wow. So like where does this go for you from here? Like is this it for you? You continue this
Yeah.
way?
I think so, because I've tested. I feel like I've tested everything, and anytime I add in other foods, I I get sick, or I get acne, or I get joint issues, or my brain just stops working. So I'll never have coffee again. Definitely not. I'll eat some cooked meat sometimes, but I do feel better having raw. But also, I'm just really interested to see the effects as well, more than anything, of raw meat. And also, I notice I eat less when I'm eating raw. So I could eat like 1.5 to 2 kilos of meat a day. Like I can eat a lot. I'm not that tall. Um, that's cooked meat, but when I'm eating raw, I can eat about like half of that, and I'm okay. I'm full. So there's that too, and I found that interesting.
Yeah, I mean that based on how carnivore is anyway, that would kind of suggest to me you're just getting more nutrition into your body, and your body's satisfied with that nutrition, right?
That's it. Yeah, yeah. So I think I'm just getting more of the nutrients with the raw food, and my body's just like, yeah, that's it. You don't need any more. Yeah, so I think I'll continue it forever. I don't see myself ever eating anything else because I just feel awful when I do.
It's awesome to it's awesome to hear your story because it's you know, it's different to what most people would be coming on to talk about. So it's really
Yeah,
cool that you've been doing this. I mean, it's basically an experiment for this time, right? To
yeah,
see what works, what doesn't work,
yeah,
and that's a great thing I think about carnivore is you eliminate so much, you can really find out what your triggers are, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely. Like, I thought it was strange myself, so I can imagine people listening to this are going to think it's really strange and it's really far to go. Um, but yeah, if they try it, they might think differently.
Nice. So, if people want to reach out to you, Rachel, do you have an Instagram or a Facebook or a YouTube?
I don't at the moment, but I was thinking to do something, but more along the lines of maybe like affiliate marketing for some farmers in Ireland, and I'm making some products, some tallow products. So when I get it up and running, I'll let you know. But for the moment, no, there's nothing.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
And if you want to see Rachel in our diabetes video, check out this video next. Rachel, how did you find hang on.